Yes, I salute you all. Thanks for listening and thanks for being on, basically. And I urge you to subscribe to the channel, like the videos, basically. Where you feel that we are agreeing or you haven't understood, put it in the comment section so that we can answer it and we understand each other, basically. So today we are under constitutional history. And today we are going to look at the 1920 Order in Council. Basically, the 1920 Order in Council, before going into any further, we all know that this was the Her Majesty's rule that was imposed directly to his foreign territories or the colonies. But before, I want to take you a rewind back, whereby before the 1920 coming in place, there was the 1919 Native Authority Ordinance. It was brought in to consolidate the colonial rule immediately after the 1902 Order in Council, basically. This 1919 Native Authority Ordinance, for it actually, the major emphasis as why it was brought to show the jurisdiction of the chiefs or the native rulers of the province, basically. Realize that these native rulers or the chiefs were supposed to rule in certain territory. So this was the answer to the question. However much it was brought to identify the jurisdiction, but nevertheless, it was there to consolidate the colonial rule in the territories of Her Majesty, basically. First of all, it identified the powers and the duties and the privileges of the chiefs. For you to become a chief, you had to know what am I supposed to do, what am I not supposed to do, basically. So that was its major emphasis. It showed the jurisdiction, the powers of the chiefs. It showed the powers of the chiefs in the different areas, the privileges. For you as a chief, what are you benefiting? You get all the commands came from the commissioner. The commissioner was the head of the protectorate, basically. And these chiefs were the overall They were the overseer. They took over control and the supervision of the areas that they had jurisdiction in, basically. And also they had that it was called the coercive instrument. This coercive instrument, basically, it was to ensure that people pay tax, people carry out farming, and people can do anything that, basically, where the commissioner could raise revenue. It was the emphasis. Realize that this instrument that was brought, it was like a system of divide and rule. And most of the historians there, we all know that the negativity of divide and rule, it made the Africans divided. So it was brought. Basically, however much actually this white man, they realized that they cannot approach African directly. They had to look for those chiefs. That's what we call the indirect rule. It passed through the African leaders, basically. Rising taxes, growing cash crops, and many more. As we realize that, that's a brief that I can talk about the 1919, the Native Authority Ordinance. Realize for it was there, its major sole purpose, it was there to show the jurisdiction of the chiefs, basically. But however, in the due course, that's why I realized that they brought in the 1920 Order in Council. The 1920 Order in Council, it was brought in to reinstate or to reform the 1902, to reform the reforms that were in 1902. And basically what you have to know, or what you have to bear in mind about the 1920, for it came with some innovation. Innovations, basically. And one of it, or what I can call, is that the name of the commissioner changed into the governor. There was change of name. Realize that in 1902, the head of the protectorate was known as the commissioner. But when you realize in 1920, the name of the commissioner was called a governor. Now he's a governor and was the head of the head of the protectorate, basically. Not that in mind. And in other words, realize that still under the 1920 Order in Council, realize that it came with basic features. Basic features, it came like with the three arms of a specific government. There was, first of all, an executive council that was formulated. This executive council was appointed by Her Majesty, all the way from England. This Her Majesty's council realized that its sole proprietorship or its sole purpose it was to ensure that the reforms or the things that Her Majesty wanted be implemented in the colonial what? States. That was the executive what? Council. And this executive council, what you have to bear in mind, or what you have to know, is that it could only conduct meetings at the will of Her Majesty. You get, if Her Majesty didn't want to conduct any meeting, there couldn't be any meeting that could take place or any meeting that can move on. And also what you have to bear in mind that however much Her Majesty was the one who appointed the people on the executive council, the governor also had a sole duty to dismiss whoever felt that he was unfit to the executive what? Executive council. The executive council had like 5 positions. First of all, there was the Attorney General under the executive council. The Attorney General was there basically. There was the Director of Finance, the Director of Agriculture, the Director of Transport, among others. Those were the people that sat on the executive council. And this executive council was appointed by Her Majesty, but they could be dismissed at the will of what? Of the governor. You get. So then also we realized that the 1920 Ordinance Council also formulated the what? The LEGICO, the Legislative Council. This Legislative Council basically it had the sole purpose. First of all, it had this LEGICO. First bear in mind before, the LEGICO was only composed by the protectorate people, the Europeans. No African was presented on the LEGICO. And the LEGICO was like a parliament. That's the contrast that I can put it to date. It was like a parliament. It was the sole body that supervised the protectorate. That was the LEGICO. Decisions were always made in the LEGICO. The LEGICO could decide on what to do, on what not to do. It could decide on the reforms, on the things that can be abolished and things can be what? Established. So this LEGICO was supposed to be governed by the governor and 2 members that were appointed by what? By Her Majesty. That is the LEGICO. You get it? And this LEGICO basically, since the governor was the sole overseer or was the chairperson of the LEGICO, together with 2 ministers that were appointed by Her Majesty from England, realized that still the Her Majesty was the one in charge of the meetings that were always presided by the LEGICO. He was the one to wish whether the meetings can take place or they don't take place basically. That was Her Majesty. Although he wasn't physically in, but he was somewhere directing, making the what? The regulations and rules to be followed by the LEGICO. Both the LEGICO and the Legislative Council conducted meetings at the will of what? Her Majesty. So note that in mind. You get. And some of the purposes of the LEGICO, first of it was to make laws. You get. To make laws. That was the sole purpose of the LEGICO. It was there to make laws basically. And also it was there to constitute the court. You get. However much there was also the judiciary, but it was there to constitute the court, to make laws, to constitute the court, and also to ensure the administration of justice, that justice is put upon everyone without undue regard to what? To technicalities. So note that in mind basically. What you have to bear in mind or what you have to put in place is that realize that the LEGICO, this LEGICO, make laws, constitute the court, and also to ensure the administration of what? Of justice, to ensure that justice is delivered to every person. But given the fact that Africans were not part of the LEGICO, realize that there was inequality in the formulation of its policies basically. And also when you move further, realize that it was this 1920 Ordinance Council, it also brought the judicature system, or the system of judiciary. However, nevertheless, the system that was earlier there, the 1902 Ordinance Council, it is the same system that was still there in the what? In the 1920. The formulation of court remained the same. There were Her Majesty's Court of Uganda that was still there. But only the reform that was pushed by the 1920 Ordinance Council, it was the East African Court of Appeal, which was formulated in 1921, basically. So that's what some of the renovations that the 1920 Ordinance Council pushed. You understand? Pushed that there should be the East African Court of Appeal, which was formulated in in 1921. So basically not that in mind. And also when you realize that, nevertheless, that since this 1920 Order in Council brought the 3 organs that an outstanding government could have, not 3 organs, but nevertheless realize that it violated the principle of rule of law and the principle of separation of power, since each organ couldn't decide on its own. You get? What do I mean? When you relate the principles of Professor Dicey and Montesquieu, realize that the Order in Council, however much it brought those organs as a formality, but the principles that were witnessed by Professor Dicey and Montesquieu were violated, basically. You get? So not that in mind. But what we appreciate that it brought some outstanding government, the organs of an outstanding government, but it violated the principle of separation of power and the principle of what? Of rule of law. Basically, not that in mind, basically. And nevertheless, those are some, that's what they call the 1920 Order in Council. There are some of the constitutional reforms that were implemented immediately after the 1900 Buganda Agreement in the Republic of what? Of Uganda. But other than that, thank you for listening. Subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you very much.